My name's Amelia Gentleman. I'm a journalist at The Guardian, and I've written a book called The Windrush Betrayal, Exposing the Hostile Environment. This is Paulette Wilson and her daughter Natalie Barnes. I first met Paulette in the autumn of 2017 at the beginning of what would become a long investigation into the Windrush scandal. Paulette had been getting a number of letters from the Home Office telling her that she was here illegally, even though she'd lived in Britain for 50 years. When we met, she'd just been released from a week in Yarlswood detention centre and had been told that she still faced deportation to Jamaica, a country she hadn't visited for 50 years. She didn't know why the Home Office was targeting her. She considered herself to be British. We published an article about her detention in The Guardian, and the response was instantaneous from our readers. There was complete outrage. But it wasn't clear why the Home Office had treated her like that. The day after we published the article, I had a call from a man who said I needed to come and see his father, Anthony Bryan. Anthony Bryan had also come from Jamaica as a child in 1965, had lived in Britain for almost 50 years, and had been told by the Home Office that he was also here illegally. Anthony had spent 5 weeks in detention and had just been released after a lawyer got involved. He didn't know why the Home Office had targeted him. He also was being told that he was an illegal immigrant, but it wasn't clear why. In the weeks that followed the publication of those articles, slowly I began to be contacted by other people who were having difficulties with the Home Office. I met Hubert, who'd been sacked from his job when the Home Office classified him as an illegal immigrant. He was unable to travel home to visit his mother when she was dying. "It's completely ruined my life," he told me. He showed me his passport that he'd arrived on in 1960 when he came from Jamaica, aged 3, with his mother. When you look at the passport, you can see it says British passport and looks very similar to the old passports that anybody would have had living in the UK in the 60s and 70s. You can also see here the stamp put in the passport by the immigration official on his arrival that says that he was given indefinite leave to remain on arrival. I also met Renford McIntyre, who had lost his job as a driver for the NHS when the Home Office wrongly told him he was an immigration offender. When he spoke to The Guardian, he was living in this industrial unit you can see here. He'd been made homeless as a result of the Home Office's targeting of him. And I met Sylvester Marshall, who'd come also from Jamaica as a teenager, had worked here all his life, and had been told that he was going to be charged £54,000 for the radiotherapy treatment he needed for prostate cancer, because officials didn't recognise that he was living here legally. When we met, he wasn't receiving the radiotherapy treatment he needed because he didn't have £54,000. He had arrived here legally in 1973. As a result of the introduction of the hostile environment, it turned out that many thousand people who'd come from the Caribbean entirely legally had been wrongly branded illegal immigrants. Some of them were forced out of the country. I met Vernon Van Riel, 64, who was stranded homeless in Jamaica for 13 years, unable to return to his family in London. For a while, he lived in an abandoned roadside grocery shack. I also met Jocelyn John, who'd arrived from Grenada in 1963. She had been forced out of the country after being told that she would be arrested and deported if she didn't leave voluntarily and go back to Grenada, the country she had left when she was 3. In the weeks which followed, I began to understand more about the migration patterns that had begun with the arrival of the Empire Windrush into Tilbury Docks on the 22nd of June 1948. The arrival of 500 passengers from the Caribbean on this ship has come to symbolise the start of the post-war wave of migration. The people who were affected by the Windrush scandal tended to be a younger generation, but came as part of the same wave of migration from the Caribbean. To begin with, when we published articles about Paulette and Anthony and Hubert and Renford, there was very little political response. But that all changed in April of 2018 when the Commonwealth Heads of Government Summit arrived in London. Downing Street refused initially to have a meeting with the Caribbean leaders to discuss the issue of why so many people were being targeted in this way by the Home Office. We published an article on the front page of The Guardian reporting on this snub, and within hours the government had changed its position. Theresa May apologised for the treatment of so many of the Caribbean people who'd been told that they were not here legally, wrongly, who'd been made homeless, who'd lost their jobs, who'd been unable to travel, and who had in some cases been deported or detained. Theresa May met the Caribbean leaders on the second day of the summit to apologise belatedly, saying that she was sorry for any anxiety that had been caused. The political scandal lasted for 2 weeks, and at the end of it, Amber Rudd, the Home Secretary, resigned. The new Home Secretary promised a reform of the Home Office. Sarah O'Connor, Anthony Bryan, Paulette Wilson, Sylvester Marshall and El Waldo Romeo are all here in this picture. They've just been to a meeting in Parliament to talk about how things needed to be changed. I really like this picture because all of the people here who I'd interviewed for the reporting I did are looking so much happier and relieved as things really look like they're beginning to change. As a result of their bravery in coming forward and talking about what happened to them, real reform has begun to take place. The government has issued papers to 6,000 people who didn't previously have them. Many people have got their jobs back and people have got their homes back. This picture is of Sarah O'Connor and her daughter Stephanie O'Connor. Sarah arrived in Britain from Jamaica aged 6 in 1967. She was told she was an illegal immigrant in 2016 and was unable to work. She spoke out passionately about what had happened to her and why it was wrong. And finally, in the summer of 2018, she received her citizenship. Sadly, Sarah died a month after this photograph was taken. And it was my determination to make sure that Sarah's story didn't get forgotten, and the stories of people like Paulette and Sylvester and Anthony and Hubert that made me want to write The Windrush Betrayal. The book talks about the development of the hostile environment and how the Home Office implemented some very brutal policies in order to get net migration reduced. I think 6 months on from having finished it, we are beginning to see some signs that things are getting better for those people who were affected by the scandal. But the real reform of the Home Office has yet to happen.